Good evening all, and welcome. Could it be that when someone passes away, a part of them may be left behind? Perhaps they were attached to an object or a house. Such is the case in these stories, so I hope you're ready, because it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. Yesterday, my dad was all excited to finally buy this gorgeous one-story brick house in Indigo Lake, Texas. It was so elegant, refined, copious amounts of land to run around, a vista of sylvan charm. No annoying neighbors, unless they were on the road. We brought all of our belongings and finally came face to face with what was going to be a beautiful nightmare. As we unpacked and arriving at the steps, immediately, strange things started to happen. The protected door opened by itself, and even the grand door that led inside the house as well, just creaked loudly, as if it were telling us to go inside. My dad thought carpenters were working there, as it was still being worked on, but only a day or two to finally complete it. My brothers exchanged confused glances and noticed the back of the house had this weird-looking pond. Behind it was a vast forest that had this sort of small cavern/grotto, which made absolutely no sense. We were wrapped in complete forest, so it was pretty creepy. We stepped inside, ignoring the doors opening, and were completely astonished with how beautiful the house was. I still remember being 7 years old and in awe, with so many things the previous owner left. It was like going back in time. Exquisite paintings, china vases, samurai swords, a chimney with a moose taxidermy above it. Oh my gosh, it was beautiful. To the right, as soon as you walk in, was the kitchen, and a strip down that led to the washing machines as well as the backyard. To the left of the living room was a fork. On the right side was going to be my parents' room. Straight led to a grand room, which we named an arcade room. It was a long hallway to get to the arcade room, and left of it led to another hallway. But what was odd of this was that there was a small shower and toilet, along with a long mirror that coated the wall and led to a door which was my brother's room in a closet. That made no sense. From my brother's room, it led you back to the fork living room, and the restroom was in the middle. The arcade room was so cold. Even during summer when you opened the windows, it was still freezing. Everyone who came would complain about how cold it was. Dad thought it was just a small draft. We had a foosball table, PlayStation system, video games, mini-movie theater, and even a gym in that arcade room. Night falls, and my dad buys the Blair Witch Project. Yep, scared the hell out of me. We were taking care of my uncle's sweet chihuahua named Brandy, who out of nowhere began barking furiously at the wall in the kitchen. She had all her hairs standing up on her foamy mouth by how angry she was. I grabbed her and put her in the washing room where she just whined. My dad was dismissive of the idea that we were living in a haunted house, but that night after the movie ending was something I'm never going to forget, as this presence started immediately to show itself. I made the decision to sleep in my parents' room for a while. In that room was a painting of a boy and a girl on a countryside walk, on a road, next to a man who was behind. I'm getting chills just being reminded of this painting. My brother is snoring in his room, and my parents are awake, and we begin to hear loud furniture swinging and rustling across. The nails are scratching the walls, and these sort of chain noises are coming from the attic with a as if someone was calling a dog. Right then and there, man, my heart sunk, and I knew this place was haunted. My dad gets up and knocks on my brother's door, thinking he moved things, but he's fast asleep. The noises were brushed off, just a raccoon outside, or the forest trees swinging due to the wind. My heart is racing, and constantly thinking of the Blair Witch Project, which made it worse thinking it was real. Because, at the time, internet wasn't a popular thing to see if a movie was fake. I left a small night light on, and it was probably 11 or midnight when my parents fell asleep. As the night pressed, I dozed and woke up. My parents were sound asleep. The door of their room is completely open, and vividly remembered we locked it. My heart is racing, as I know something is really wrong. At the foot of my bed, the end is sunken down as if someone was sitting on it, and I felt it sink down. You guys, I felt it, and I was about to pass out and throw up, when suddenly the covers of my bed toss, and I immediately felt these hands and fingernails tickle my feet. I get chills remembering it. I kicked back whatever it was, and could feel the hairs on these hands. Just massive hairy hands and arms. I yelled. I got up from a nest of blankets and somehow jumped straight into my parents' bed crying. My parents console me. Dad gets up, turns the light on, and I'm done. Right there and then I'm crying in my mum's shoulder that I don't want to live here anymore. After consoling, my dad and mum are somewhat wanting to believe me, but they can't. That night I slept in between them. I didn't sleep. My eyes were glued to the door, waiting for it to open. Next day comes, and my brother is working out in the arcade room as he plays varsity football in high school. He comes rushing to us, saying he saw little girl's feet with frilly socks on near the hallway, with a lengthy mirror. My dad doesn't believe it, but he becomes a believer eventually. I'm going to go ahead to share the experiences that happened after. A few nights later, my father is in the bathroom. He had a habit of urinating sitting down at night, so that no one gets interrupted sleep. From the windows, the moon is able to reflect some light that gallantly pierces through. As my dad is urinating, he notices my mum is at the door and says he will be done shortly. So he does his thing, and right as soon as he's about to pat my mum on the back to let her go, my dad goes right through her. The silhouette, and he falls over. That night is the one I remember he finally became a believer, and shouting at us to come out, and turns on all the lights. He was as pale as a ghost, but I was relieved that I wasn't crazy. Water always turned on as well. Bath water, even the shower, where the long mirror hallway was. One time after a party finished and everyone went home, I took a long bath with my action figures and had a huge curtain that covered it. My mum sometimes would use the bathroom whenever I showered, so I heard her walk in and noticed the shadow pass and would just say, "Hey mum?" No response. So whatever, off I played, and upon finishing the bath, the bathroom door was wide open. I came out telling my mum why she didn't close the door, and she said that she didn't use the bathroom and was outside cleaning up. It was scary. A lot of stuff went on in that house. We had family friends stay the night to look over the house while we went on a trip. That following night, they called us saying they were leaving as they were getting too spooked. The couple kept having dreams of a handsome man with hairy hands touching them, and he would laugh a lot. And his wife said that the painting in my parents' room was moving. She noticed the kids in the painting moving, and the television in that room turned on, and the volume would flood up so high to the max. They left in the middle of the night, after a mere few hours. We were all painting the fence of the house, and saw neighbors jogging on the road. They approached us and told us the house had belonged to an artist who ended his life in our garage. No one ever got close to him, as he was always reserved and spoke to no one, but joggers would see him with art supplies all the time. No one ever knew who the girl that my brother saw was. Right then and there, my mum called her, who was a spiritual person, and told her to take incense and just walk around and talk kindly to the man and ask him to leave. After the small ritual, we never felt anything. Looking back, it feels odd to have been scared. Maybe he was just really lonely and in a dark place at the time, and was just playing with me, wanting his presence to be acknowledged. The carpenters even mentioned that they would see a girl roaming around our pond with this strange face scarf on. Funny thing is, my mum stayed at home while my dad worked, and while my brother and I were in school. She never experienced or heard anything. Anyway, we ended up selling the house because it was flooding a lot, and the creepy part about the grotto in the back, near the farmer's pond, was that after coming back from evacuating the floods, we found so many dead animals stacked on top of each other. Dog, geese, cats, 2 horse and owls. It just gives me the shivers every day. The arcade room is still frozen cold as well. I haven't been back, but I would be more than happy to share the paintings that he had in the house, as all of his belongings are in storage. I'm 23 now. This started when I was 3 or 4. Everything that happened that night, I remember like it was yesterday. The memory's so vivid and forever in my mind. The second floor of my house at the time was really just a small landing with 3 bedrooms and a bathroom off it. Immediately at the top and to your right was my bedroom. The bathroom adjacent to the stairs, then my sister's bedroom, and my parents' bedroom. My mum would put my sister and I to bed at 7 o'clock every night. I always had issues falling asleep as a kid, but would eventually drift off. My bedroom had a closet next to the door, and next to that, 2 windows with a dresser sitting between them, with my bed pushed against the wall, foot end of the bed near the door. One night, not unlike any other, we're put to bed and I finally find sleep after a few hours of just lying there, only to wake up some hours later. It was about 2 or 3 in the morning. I rolled over to scan my room. I've always been afraid of the dark, so the room was lit up and my nightlight was plugged in at the end of the bed. Standing in front of the window furthest from me, near the closet, I saw what I thought at the time was an angel, quite literally glittering gold in front of my eyes, standing at least 7 feet tall, staring out the window. My movement must have grabbed its attention, because immediately its head turned to look at me. There were no facial features except for a strong defined jawline, though faceless. It wasn't like a freaky facelessness. At this point I was more curious than afraid. Then it started to yell at me. It kept telling me to shut up. The yelling quickly turned to screaming and I freaked. I was one giant goosebump, and I got up from bed, opened my door and looked into the lit hallway. My parents always left that light on at night in case my sister or I needed something or got scared in the middle of the night. Almost in slow motion, I noticed the air felt too still. Something was off. Before I could process anything, I took 1 step forward, and out of the bathroom shoots this thing. It gets right in front of my face, screaming a blood-curdling scream that still echoes in my ear to the day. The face of this thing was just grey and sinister, eyes completely blacked out, skin cracked, no lips, just a black hollow hole with the screams coming from it. Long, black hair flying around, as if there were a fan switched on behind it, and I lost it. I screamed so loud, I swear the entire house shook. I barged into my parents' room, tears streaming uncontrollably down my face. My mum looked scared and confused. My dad, just terrified. I don't remember what happened after that. I'm sure I told my parents what happened and ended up sleeping with them for the next few weeks. Growing up, I asked my mum about that night, and she explained how I barged in crying, rambling off some story about an angel or something. Today, I don't know what it was. My dad, on the other hand, never said much about it, and instead started warning me to stay away from Ouija boards, and told me some freaky stories about things that had happened to him. As my parents divorced, growing up, things got worse with respect to what I was being exposed to. My dad would show me scary pop-up videos and play creepy music. I was 6 or 7 at this point. Safe to say I hated going to my dad's because I thought whatever I'd seen that night was somehow connected to him. Eventually my mum remarried. We moved and things were okay. Then I decided to stop seeing my dad completely, for unrelated reasons, as I was 9 years old at this time. And that's when things started again. The air was ridiculously heavy all the time. I hated sleeping in my room. I always felt like there was something at the end of my bed, just watching me. I tried to ignore it. For 9 years, constantly living in fear. We moved out of that house to somewhere around the corner. And once my mum and stepdad divorced, that way we wouldn't have to switch schools as I was about to graduate high school and my sister still had 1 more year. I still had access to the house as my ex-stepdad still lived there. They were using my old bedroom for storage and always kept the blinds closed, as I had while living there. One morning when everyone in my old house was at work, my friend and I decided to sesh in the garage quickly. We had the okay from the ex-stepdad, so long as we weren't driving anywhere afterwards. We walked through the front door, through the foyer to the garage, and got settled. I could already feel the extra 10 pounds on my chest, and I really wanted to make this quick. I had previously spoken with my friend about what I was feeling in this house, as we had been friends for years at this point, but never gave her much context. Not even 5 minutes into the sesh, we heard the footsteps above the garage, i.e. my old bedroom. My entire body went cold. My friend immediately looked at me, and we waited for another second and heard them again. This time, like a stomp type running around the room. We said screw it, packed up and got the hell out of there. I locked up and walked down the driveway completely freaked, trying to push the thousands of thoughts running through my mind out my head. Then, my friend let out a tiny shriek. I turned back to immediately ask her what was wrong. They were doing some work. I thought she could have stepped on a rogue nail or something, but the horror was written on her face, and I looked up at the window but the blinds were closed. I asked her again what was up. She said for whatever reason she felt like she needed to look up to my old bedroom. She said the blinds were open in the window looking down on us, and I quote her words, "This thing, with black hair and black eyes and cracked skin, and just a hollow black hole for a mouth, was staring down." She said it so fast, terror was oozing from every word she said. That's when she burst into tears, and so did I. I was too freaked out to tell her what happened when I was a kid, and I didn't want to scare her more. I suggested we get the hell out of there. Since then, nothing's happened. I recently traveled to Rome, specifically the Vatican, and got a blessed St. Michael pendant for extra measure, seeing as whatever it was followed me in silence throughout the years. The thing hasn't bothered me other than showing up in a very specific nightmare I've had every 8 to 10 years since my first encounter. If this thing is still on my tail, I'll be due for a nightmare within the next year. Having so much history myself with the paranormal, I don't freak out over creaks in the floor or the occasional door shutting on its own. I believe most things can be explained. When we first moved into this house in Washington 3 years ago, we saw a few random orbs here and there. Nothing that felt harmful. In fact, one orb even danced to the music alongside my granddaughter one day, and it felt like a child. The house sits on acres of field, surrounded by forest and a few farms. For some reason, the guest room, laundry room, and bathroom are always freezing cold, plus cool air comes from the guest bedroom closet. I keep a blanket hanging up in the hallway door to keep the cold isolated. I figure those rooms are just cold because they are added on and are built halfway over our well. I have my mother's ashes in my home, but at the same time I felt bad because when I was asked if I wanted my sister's ashes later, it scared me for some reason. I don't know why. She was a very loving person, but for many years I felt darkness around her, and I just couldn't. A year passed, and that fear left me. I remember her telling me one day before she died that she had a recurring dream of her death, and she was stuck in the desert. It then dawned on me that her ashes were being cared for by my daughter who lives in the desert. It was time to let her be here with Mum. After she arrived, her ashes were placed next to our mother's ashes outside my room, and like my mother, she was surrounded by some of her mementos. At first, there wasn't a problem, but after time, that's when the kids started seeing and experiencing things that made them feel uncomfortable. It didn't feel like my sister. This was something else. Strangely, absolutely no one in the family has felt her presence since she passed. I know my kids looked towards me for assurance. I guess they thought that, like in other homes, I could just make it all go away. But I think they stayed hidden from me in the beginning and preyed on those who showed fear. So it was targeting my grown kids, that being my son and his fiancée. I felt bad. I kept telling my son that there was nothing here and that our house wasn't haunted because we cleansed it after my sister passed away. Cody, if you're hearing this, I'm sorry for not wanting to believe you at the time. I was just trying to protect you and the kids from being scared. So there are a few things that have been happening in our home for the past few years. One late afternoon I was at the store, so my son and his fiancée were watching my 2 grandchildren for me. They were playing hide and seek. They told me something wasn't right in there. Each of them experienced what they said felt like someone or something taking up space within them in the closet, practically in their face. It had been a toy room in the beginning, but the kids wouldn't play in there. The only person who has ever slept there with no problem is my ex on a visit. He was a non-believer, until just the day when we were sitting in there watching a show together, and we observed his dog intently follow something move around the room. Then the bathroom door opened, and his dog watched whatever it was going to the bathroom, and the door shut behind it. At that point, his dog dove under the blanket. My ex's eyes were as big as saucers, and he asked me if I saw what he saw. Laughing inside at the former non-believer, I said yes. No one will ever sleep in there, not even me. 6 months ago, my son told me that he went into the kitchen to grab something to drink the night before, and he saw a dark shadow over his left shoulder in his reflection on the microwave. He turned around quickly to look behind him, and there was nothing there. He still felt something close to him, and the hair on his arm and neck were raised. So when he looked into his reflection this time in the window over the sink, and again, it was back, with its head even closer to his. Then the cabinet door shook back and forth, then opened all the way and shut. He said that he yelled, not caring if he woke anyone up, and ran upstairs to his room. I don't blame him. Many times he and his fiancée have seen big shadow masses in corners of various rooms, but never in my bedroom. Waiting outside my door, where my sister's ashes are, but never inside my room. There was a time not too long ago they were both sitting in my van talking one night, and they said the form of a man came out from behind a tree, crossed the grass, and sat with his hands in his lap on the front porch, and then faded away. Then they told me about the bathroom. Oh my, that bathroom. I can't even. His fiancée was taking a bath after everyone had gone to sleep, as to not disturb anyone. She was relaxing in our big old claw bathtub in the quiet of night, and she heard all of us sleeping, so she knew for a fact no one was up. There was a tapping on the bathroom door and she answered, to no response. The doorknob started to jiggle, then stopped, so she asked again, "Who is it? I'm in the tub." There was still no response. She thought that whoever it was decided to go to the other bathroom, so she relaxed, and she was laying there. But then something felt off, as she heard a noise at the door, and she watched as the doorknob slowly unlocked itself. When she told me that, my blood ran cold. This didn't just happen once. My son was sitting in there and he heard tapping, followed by the door unlocking on him too. The other day, my son said that he had gone to the bathroom around 3 in the morning. He knew everyone was asleep because he heard all of us snoring, so he didn't quite shut the door all the way, but it was closed. He heard heavy breathing as if someone had their mouth at the crack of the door. Then he heard a quiet voice whisper, "I can hear you." That poor boy was scared to death. I, for the first time, experienced the doorknob unlocking itself on me 3 times in a row in my bathroom last night. That surprised me. It has not always been bad experiences here, though. Since my mother passed, I feel her sometimes around me. We all do. Just last month, I was talking to my son in the living room, and I saw a light. We don't live near a street, so it wasn't from a car. It was soft and illuminating, as it floated from the front window curtain around to the wall behind my son. I got such a warm feeling and said, "Hey, Mama," and watched it as it went behind the recliner, where my son was sitting, and then up behind his head and disappeared. He didn't see this or know why I said that. Just then he shrugged his shoulders up and put his hands on the back of his head, saying that it felt like his hair was being stroked. That brought tears to both of us. We all know when she is here because it feels warm and loving, like her, and sometimes we smell her sweet perfume. My grandson, who is autistic, was too young to comprehend my mother's passing. He sometimes talks to her, almost like he is answering what seems to be a question. He is only 6 and has the purest soul. I wish I could hear her voice speak to me again. And then you have things that happen that at the time you didn't understand, but when you find out, everything falls into place. This was one such time. In March, I had a few aluminium balloons left over from my grandson's birthday, and they lasted a very long time. All of them fell to the floor except one particular balloon. It kept following me midway in the air around the house. The air conditioner nor heater was on, and all the windows were shut. I went to my bedroom, and it followed and stayed in my bed. I went into the laundry room, and it followed there as well. This went on for a solid week after a while. It just started getting annoying, but we didn't think anything of it. We just swatted it away. One day, my son and I were talking in the kitchen, and it came in from the living room, where we just saw it laying on the floor moments before and lowered itself to go under the door frame and stopped mid-height between us. He took it and pushed it back into the living room. Not 4 minutes later, and it was back mid-height between us. This time he put it all the way in the laundry room, and it still made its way back, lowering to come through 2 door frames and staying afloat midway between us again. At that point it was too weird. We both looked at each other and said, "Nah." So I took it and said, okay, if this is you, Mum, do it again. I put it back in the living room and it stayed there floating. It didn't feel like her at the moment. It felt different, almost familiar, but not in a bad way. We went back to talking, and there it was again between us. Well, I didn't know this at the time. In fact, I only just found out a few weeks ago that my dear friend passed away in March and his family didn't have my number to tell me. One of the last things he told me was that when he dies he was going to come harass me just for fun and let me know that he's here and he loves me. When I found out, I called out to my son saying, "It was Tom! It was Tom after all." After I told him the sad news, he said that it gave him a bit of peace. We all knew that this is something he would do, and it blew our minds. I just wish I found out then, so that I could have told him that I love him too. 3 nights ago, I saw a light low to the ground in the kitchen, and 5 minutes later my granddaughter saw the same light, formed like a feather, fluttering in front of her. My son also told me that a light trailed up over and across in his room. Another time he walked into my room and saw a light above my head. My neighbor is confident something happened on this land. I talked to him to see if he had been experiencing or seeing anything unusual, without making myself look crazy. He said that he does not go out after dark, but he has heard the screams in the forest and his pets acting strangely from time to time. As we were talking, his roommate came home and asked me what we were talking about. When I told him, he pointed to the young man I was talking to first and said, "You see, I'm not nuts." Apparently, he had seen things as well and calls what he sees in his bedroom a demon boy, because he doesn't know what it is. He even saged in this room, and if you think about it, that goes along with the orb that danced with my granddaughter when we first moved in. And no, it's not a demon. I think that perhaps it's a child that connected or roams the property. We have seen so many beautiful things here that it outweighs the bad. Someday after I'm gone, I hope to be a part of it. I want to be the whisper of encouragement in my loved one's ears and a gentle stroke upon their face. I want them to always know that they don't have to be afraid, and that they are, and always will be loved, from now until forever. As for what is in this house, I think since I have been more aware of the darkness, it shows itself less. I do enjoy feeling my loved ones around though, and my kids do too. Someday we will move from this place and hopefully one of our loved ones will follow. Today, when I arrived home after running errands, my ex told me that without a doubt he saw something. At first I told him to stop playing around because I thought he was making fun of us. I've known this man for 24 years, so I know when he's serious. And this time he was definitely shaken. He said that he was standing in the guest room, and he was about to go into the bathroom to wash his hands, when someone tall who he thought was my son turned on the light and darted into the bathroom really fast, closing the door behind him. He waited for a bit, but didn't hear anything. He got tired of waiting, washed his hands in the kitchen, and still hadn't heard anything for a while. So we went to the door and asked if my son was okay, to not receive an answer, but the light was still on. He tentatively pushed open the door, to find nothing. Confused, he went to my son's room and knocked, and asked him why he did that and left the light on. But when my son came out of his room, he was wearing a burgundy shirt and pants. With a shake in his voice, my ex asked if he had changed his clothes, to which my son responds, "No, why?" The person my ex saw was wearing a blue t-shirt and shorts. My son told me that when he opened the door, my ex turned pale. On another occasion, my son's fiancée was in the kitchen today and we are all putting away groceries. She has mid-length hair, and in front of everyone her hair flipped up like someone tossed it. It freaked her out and she said it gave her shivers. I promised my other son I would come help paint his new place, so I bathed my grandkids and made them something to eat. I figured I would only be gone a few hours, but it took way longer than expected. When I arrived, there were all kinds of commotions going on in my room, and my grandson was crying uncontrollably. No one could understand him because he was so upset, so he was trying to act out what just happened. After I calmed him down, he told me that he was getting tired and laid down. He said something woke him up, and he heard my car, so he went towards the bedroom door, when a dark hole formed at the top, outside my door, and a dark shadow boy thing came out of it. He said the boy stood in the doorway and pushed him back and slammed the baby gate, trapping him in the room. He said it was evil. He kept saying that over and over. He's evil. After the gate shut, my grandson screamed, so everyone in the house ran to see what was wrong. I know kids have active imaginations, but I know him. He's autistic, and he doesn't lie or make things up. He was visibly shaken up, and since last night, his story hasn't changed. I had a long talk with my dad last night about the house I grew up in. I lived there from about age 6 to 15. I'm 21 now. Apparently the previous owner was a recluse and mentally ill. He chose to end his life with a shotgun in my bedroom, next to the window. There's a bleached spot there on the hardwood floor that I had always covered up with a chair. His brother would check on him periodically, but this time he didn't for about 3 weeks. Then came over and found him dead. My dad found this out after we moved in. He said a police officer came up to him when he was doing yard work and said, "Don't let the history of this place scare you. It's a beautiful property." And my dad was like, "What?" Needless to say, I'm creeped out. I don't remember ever feeling unsafe in the house, but the lock on my door had locked itself numerous times during the first year we lived there. I vividly remember being locked inside there with my friend one day, and firefighters had to come and pull us out the window. After that, my father just straight up took the doorknob off, so I had no doorknob growing up. There were also crosses above my sister and I's door that I never really questioned, but apparently my dad had a priest come over and bless the doorway. This affected my dad a lot. One day he was doing roof work on a ladder right outside my window, perfectly in control, when the ladder folded and slipped sideways and he fell 10 feet and almost died. And when my parents got divorced and my mum took my sister and I to live elsewhere, my dad lived there alone for 2 years. He said it got so disturbing he finally had to move. He said that when he came home from work at night through the basement, it would reek of smoke. The man was a smoker when alive. The scent was so strong, he was convinced on several occasions that someone had broken in. But then my dad would go upstairs and come back down as a test, and the smell would be gone. I'm just a little spooked finding out that I lived in a room where this had happened, especially since I had my own attempt in that same room. Just kind of a mind blow. Does anyone else have positive stories of this kind of spirit moving on after or something like that? I'm having a hard time processing all of this and really hope that the man is at rest now. I landed a summer job a few years ago while getting my bachelor's degree in history at the Winchester Mystery. For those of you who don't know, the Winchester House is an 160-room mansion built off land purchased by Sarah Winchester at the turn of the 19th century that used to be an 8-room farmhouse like any other in pre-Silicon Valley. The owners of the place today are descendants of the Brown family who purchased the Victoria home in public auction. They have before claimed it to be the most haunted house in North America. I find the owners of it today to be shady, lucrative people. The admin/owners treat us like tour guides, and we're on minimum wage. It is hardly a sustainable job if it wasn't for the tips and the nice folk and the generosity of them that they give us at the end of the tours. They typically hire 6 to 12 tour guides per year, as some do it seasonally and others retire. It's a balance between college/grad students studying history or in theatre programs and middle-aged plus elder folk who have been around for quite some time. The medical benefit from the job is, if you get injured at the house, they will pay for all related medical expenses. But that's about it from my time working there, which was within the past few years. My role as a tour guide was to coordinate my tours, which ranged from as little as 3 to 28 people on a 65-minute guided tour within an 8-hour shift. So there'd be about 4 to 6 tours a day per guide. When I started out, I was given a week to explore the mansion on my own and get a look around. After being tested on a script written in part by the mansion historian, a full-time position held by a really nice lady, and recycled material from when tours began in the 1920s, I've explored at least 80% of the mansion, as some places are locked and really hard to get past, and I've had a handful of unexplainable occurrences. One notable instance is when I was giving a tour to 27 people. While in the 13th bathroom, which had the unfinished state-of-the-art shower, my tour delivery was interrupted by a very faint shriek that sounded as though it were coming down the halls from the switchback staircase. I asked if others had heard it and they said yes, which was quite strange. More eerie, but also, I really am not sure if it was my imagination. And during my second day of training, I walked up the 4th turn of the switchback staircase and thought I heard footsteps to the rhythm of a shadowy figure that suddenly creeped into the corner of my eye. As I walked up the shallow stairs, it was coming up from them and was well behind me. Imagination or not, I ran into the upstairs hay room, which is now a display room for artifacts, as fast as I could. Apparently, seeing a shadowy womanly figure in black has been the complaint of others as well. Other things would happen, like a tour in front of me one time witnessed a photograph frame fall from a high shelf in the ballroom and shatter. The sudden smell of roses in Madame Sarah's dead room. Us guys called it the dead room, but the admins didn't wish guests to know that was the name we gave the room. The scariest experience of all was exploring the unlit attic, which is off limits and used for storage of decor. In between a tour break with my phone flashlight, the beautiful 3rd floor window, which can be seen in nearly every online front picture of the mansion, is where I encountered a horrific, grotesque figure in a woman's Victorian morning gown. Its hollow eyes and rotting face were literally set up at the window, holding a rose and pointing outwards. For a mere second I seized in terror with my phone light fixed. For me to see it was a rubber posable zombie decor used for spooky events. There were many memories made there. One of my favorite was giving tours to company-hosted reservations. Open drinks aren't allowed in the house for purpose of preservation. Say you were to spill it. But when Google and other tech companies bought out the place for the night, the admins would turn a blind eye and ask those of us chosen to host, and not ask them to put their drinks away. The employees of said companies were quite nice folk though, and were easy enough to get along with and to entertain. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I thought these haunted house stories were top-notch today. I really enjoyed reading them, really fun. Even the last one was a really fun and entertaining story, a really cool place I'd like to visit someday in the future. I have told you guys in the past I've always wanted to visit a haunted house or hotel in the hopes of seeing something otherworldly. Well, let's hope that day comes soon, eh? In any case, if you enjoyed the video, you know what to do. And if there's a story that you would like to share, you can send it to my email or my Reddit. Links in the description. As always, a huge thanks to my wonderful patrons, whose names can be seen on screen. If you would like to have your name on screen and receive a number of benefits, feel free to check out the link in the description. But for now, guys, it's time for me to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.